Okay, okay, let's continue. My phones have all cooled down, and I just did a microphone test. The wind here should not interfere with you being able to understand me. So this is part 3 of the Spiritual Awakening video. This is about an hour and a half after I first was recording. So I left off telling you about getting arrested in Heathrow. You know, when you live in faith, you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know how things are going to turn out. I could have been, and I probably should have been deported, but on my previous trip to England, when I was living in London, I made friends with a man who was what they call a lay person in his church, and I became, relatively, in the time we had to get to know each other, I became good friends with this guy. And so what they did when I was arrested, I said, I actually have a contact here in London, and I was coming to visit him, and I made up a little bit of a story, but luckily he fell into place with it. I said, I'm fighting my addiction to marijuana, and this guy, because of his spirituality, he was going to be able to help me. So they contacted him and asked him to vouch for me, and he did. And so I had to go I had to go in front of I spent the night in jail, spent a good part of the next day in jail. I finally had a hearing in front of the bailiff that afternoon, and they charged me a £50 fine and then said that I was in the hands of customs. So, and the guy who arrested me was this really cool guy. He was like really understanding. How can you have an experience where you're getting arrested for seriously breaking the law, and you get a neat arresting officer? But I was being sincere and authentic with them the way I am being with you now. And so, so I go out and I meet him afterwards. He didn't give me a hug or anything, but so just hang on, we got to talk to the customs guys. Customs guys came out and said, we're going to let you stay in the country for 6 months. And they said something like, if you even get caught jaywalking, boom, you're going to be deported. So I was on my best behavior, and I didn't stay for 6 months. I stayed for not even a week. I met my friend David. His name was David. Can't remember his last name, but I mean, this was 30 years ago. This is more than 30 years ago. And I spent the night in a youth hostel. Okay, so here's the way I work. A lot of the time I can work on faith and even blind faith, but a lot of the time I work on what I figure out with my mind. And so I had a plan figured out in my mind. And I'm telling you something, just now, while I was getting ready to tell you this, I had a realization, because I've been questioning about this decision I made. I switched plans. My original plan was to go to Scotland and to go to the Findhorn community I think it's on the Isle of Skye or something like that, a really remote spot. It's a spiritual community, and it was like cutting edge, New Age Christianity at the time. And I was like, man, this is what speaks to me. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's the place where I could meet somebody that would, match with me. And so I was going to go to Findhorn. I spent a night in a youth hostel in King's Cross. It's the same place I stayed my first visit to London. So I was familiar with the place, and so I go upstairs, get my bunk, and I'm in the kitchen. This is like 9 o'clock at night, my first night back in England, and I get talking to this guy. This guy is like a 6'5" Irishman, and he said his name was Gypsy. he was like me on my first trip to England, because my first trip to England, I wanted everybody to call me D'Artagnan. And I met this amazing woman on the plane going to London the first time. She said, "Don't do that. Don't call yourself D'Artagnan. People will know you're a fake. Just be yourself." Oh my God. So anyway, this guy Gypsy, I start telling him my story. I said, "I'm on a mission from God. God is leading me on this trip to," and at this point I knew it was going to be the woman I was going to marry. And so, and I started telling everybody this, everybody I met. I think I probably even told the arresting officer that story. And he said, "Do not repeat your story to the bailiff." And he said, "Do not elaborate at all. Say, yes, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." Anyway, so I tell Gypsy, "Yeah, I'm going to Scotland. This woman, I know she's waiting for me there." And within 15 minutes, he talked me out of going to Scotland and said, "You need to go where I'm from. You need to go to Ireland." He said, "In Ireland, you'll find exactly what you're looking for. You'll find either," and I hate this terminology, but I'm just going to repeat it because it's what he said, "you'll find a saint or you'll find a whore." And as soon as he said saint, I said, "Exactly. That's exactly what I want." And yep, the next morning I was going to, catch the train to get to the outskirts of London and head north, hitchhiking to Scotland. But instead, I diverted to the west and headed to Wales and hitchhiked. Oh my God, so many stories. Hitchhiked through Wales, caught a ferry. A ferry across the Irish Sea. I got talking to a guy in a pub. I think Swansea was the name of the town I was in Wales. While I was waiting for the ferry wasn't going to leave until 11:30 that night. So I was sitting in the pub. Oh God. I don't even want to tell drinking stories, but in this experience with this guy, I was trying to prove the power of my belief in God. And I said, "I believe in God so much that," and I pulled out my Swiss Army knife out of my pocket and I opened up the blade and I said, "I believe that if I put my hand down on this counter and took the blade and stuck it into my palm, that God would heal me." And he kind of freaked out. He was like, "You don't have to do that." He said, "Please do not do that." And I didn't, but I could have. Anyway, I get to Ireland the next morning. I get a ride hitchhiking to Cork. My destination was Dingle, the town of Dingle, which is like on the furthest southwest part of the Irish island. It's like the last little city on the edge of the European continent. That was my logic. Go to the place the furthest from any city, and you'll find the woman who has not been ruined by life in a city. I wanted to have somebody that loved nature and loved God and wanted to, live on the country, out in the country. And anyway, I spent a week in Dingle, drunk every night. Met one person, one woman. There was only one woman in the entire city that I met while I was there. Although it was the off season. Okay, I'm going into way too much detail. Oh my God. Jeez. I'm sorry, man. What the hell? I don't know how to do this without going into all this detail. Okay, I'm going to make it short. 2 weeks later, I meet another woman. The second woman I meet in all of Ireland. And Yeah, see, that part of the story was much better for going into detail about, and I kind of blew it. What the hell? Um, Hold on, I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, the phone doesn't feel like it's overheating, so I'm going to see how much further I can go. So, in not finding this person in Dingle, I started losing hope. I said, oh, this isn't going to happen. I didn't have a lot of money. I counted how much money I had, and I said, well, I probably have enough to live here for another week and then buy a ticket to go back to the States, to New York City, which is a place I terribly feared. I did not want to end up in New York City on the streets, lost and aimless. So I go to Dublin and thinking, this is what I was thinking. In fact, the day I got into Dublin, I went to a travel agent to find out how much a ticket back to New York would cost. And I had, like the same calculation. I had enough to stay there for like a week. So I continue to walk. I didn't buy the ticket though. I continue to walk down the street, and I see this shop, a business, a little, like, it kind of looked like a thrift store. And the name on the sign outside the store was called Pass It On. So Pass It On is a phrase from those born-again Christian songs that we were singing when I was a teenager. And as soon as I saw that, I said, oh my God, this place is run by somebody that's a Christian, like a born-again Christian, because all I was meeting were Catholics in Ireland. I tried to talk to a priest in Dingle, and he had no clue at all my experience of spirituality. And so I go into this shop, and there's a guy there, and I start talking to him. I tell him my story. I said, I'm about ready to give up hope and go home. And he says, stay here. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I am planning to stay here for a week. And he says, no, stay here. He said, save your money. You can sleep here inside my shop. And when he heard how evangelical I was, he got all excited, and he's like, yeah, we can go out, in the morning. I'll sleep here overnight with you as well. He didn't have to. He had his own flat in town. And so I spent the night there, and I slept there in that place for a couple of months. And he got me a job. The next day, he got me a job. And so what he did every, 2 nights a week, like Tuesday and Thursday night or something like that, he had a prayer meeting where young Christian people in town he would bring in, and they would sit around and talk and sing and have a prayer meeting together. And so not the first night that I was there for that, but the second night I was there for that prayer meeting, a woman walks in the door, and I look at her, and she looked right at me. It was mainly guys in this place. In fact, she might have been the very first woman I saw ever there at all. And I diverted my glance away from her because my first reaction was, I said, Lord, please don't let the woman you have for me be like her. She was too gregarious. She's like one of those women that can be the center of attention in a group of men, and everybody's eyes are on her, and she feeds off of that. And I was like, no, I need somebody modest. I need somebody humble and quiet. I don't want the life of the party. But here's what happened. By the time we came to the next meeting, she came across the room and started talking to me. And so we started to talk, and I explained a little bit of my story. I said, I'm visiting from California. And anyway, she wasn't feeling good. She said, I'm going to take a taxi and go home. And she said, would you like to ride in the taxi with me across town? And I was like, what the hell? Why not? And so I did. And it was like an instant push. It was like God pushing me to be closer to her. And That was the beginning of everything. That was the answer God had for me, was this woman. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm at 15 minutes. What happened following that night with us going out the door, getting in a taxi together, several of the people that were in the room that saw us together said they all got hit by the Holy Spirit that we were meant to be together. 3 guys that were there who were like in the leadership of that place said that to us. And then one of the younger people, a guy who was like 16 or something, he went home and he came back the next day. He said, I had a dream last night where I saw you two getting married and having kids. But then he said something terrible happened. He said the second child that she gave birth to, she did not survive giving birth to that child. And that cast a shadow over the future we would have, where we did eventually get married. We got married about a year later, and we had our son, a year after that. And but then she became terrified of the idea that if she ever became pregnant again, that it was going to kill her. That goes into a whole nother story. That goes, oh my God, there's just so many stories, there's so many threads and cords and layers, and I'm going to end it here. Because I still want to talk more about where my spirituality went, but that was my Christian spirituality. I'll just throw out a nugget. My reliance on the Christian church lasted until 1989. So my son was born in 82. 89 is when I left the Christian church. Okay. Thanks for listening.